Stop before you spend another old quarter or dime. Check it one more time, because the coin sitting unnoticed in your pocket, drawer, or old collection could be hiding a story worth a fortune. Today, on Hidden Coin Millions, we're revealing the top 5 ultra-rare and most valuable Washington quarters and Roosevelt dimes that collectors are watching closely. And here's the scary part. Some of these coins can look completely ordinary until you notice one tiny detail that changes everything. A date, a mint mark, an unusual surface, or an extraordinary condition could turn a forgotten coin into a serious collector treasure. But I'm not revealing the biggest surprises yet. We're counting down 5 incredible coins, and the final discovery is the one you absolutely don't want to miss. So grab your old coins, check them while you watch, and stay until the very end, because your next hidden treasure could already be in your hands. Coin number 1. Now we are beginning this incredible journey with a coin that carries the history of early Washington quarter production directly in its design. This is the Washington quarter dated 1934, and it has no mint mark. The moment you see that date, you should understand that you are looking at an important early chapter in the story of the Washington quarter. The Washington quarter series began in the early 1930s, created to honor George Washington, the first president of the United States. The original design was produced by sculptor John Flanagan, with Washington's portrait appearing prominently on the obverse. On the reverse, the famous American eagle spreads its wings above a bundle of arrows and an olive branch, creating a powerful image of American strength and peace. That combination of history, symbolism, and age is exactly what gives early Washington quarters such a strong place in American coin collecting. And remember what makes this coin especially interesting. 1934 is an early date in the Washington quarter series. This is not a modern quarter that has simply been sitting around for years. This coin comes from the very beginning of a denomination that would remain a familiar part of American money for generations. Now let's talk about what this coin is made from, because this is where the story becomes even more fascinating. Early Washington quarters from this era were struck in a 90% silver and 10% copper composition, with a standard weight of approximately 6.25 grams. That means this little quarter is not merely an old piece of pocket change. It represents an era when American circulating quarters contained substantial silver. When you hold an early silver Washington quarter, you are holding a piece of American monetary history. The silver composition gives these coins a distinctive character, while decades of circulation can leave behind natural wear, darker toning, surface discoloration, and other signs of age. And the coin we are focusing on today is described as having a black layer and circulated condition. But don't make the mistake of thinking that circulation automatically makes an old coin uninteresting. Collector demand can depend on the entire combination of factors: date, mint production, originality, surfaces, remaining detail, eye appeal, scarcity, and the condition of the individual example. A coin with an unusual appearance can attract attention, but professional collectors will always want to examine the actual surfaces and authenticity before placing a final value on it. The no mint mark is another important part of the story. On United States coins, mint marks identify the facility where a coin was produced, and their presence or absence can help collectors determine where a particular issue originated. On a coin this old, examining the date and mint mark area carefully is essential. Never assume that a missing mint mark automatically means a coin is rare. The complete combination of date, design, condition, and verified characteristics is what matters. And now, take a closer look at the condition we are discussing. This 1934 Washington quarter has circulated condition with a black layer. That aged appearance can make the coin look dramatically different from a bright, freshly preserved example. For collectors, the real question is not simply whether the coin is dark. The question is whether the surfaces are original, whether the details remain identifiable, whether there is damage or cleaning, and how the coin compares with other examples from the same issue. This is also where collector demand becomes extremely important. Early Washington quarters have a powerful advantage. They combine American history, silver composition, an early series date, recognizable design, and decades of collector interest. That combination can make them exciting targets for people searching through inherited collections, old coin jars, estate finds, and forgotten accumulations. So here's your collector tip. Never judge an old Washington quarter only by its color. A dark, brown, gray, or black-looking surface does not automatically tell you the complete story. Look closely at the date, inspect the mint mark area, examine Washington's portrait and the reverse details, and avoid cleaning the coin. Cleaning can permanently alter the original surface and may seriously affect collector appeal. If you believe you have a potentially important example, professional authentication and grading can be a very smart next step. And now we reach the moment you've been waiting for. For the specific 1934 Washington quarter with no mint mark, black layer, and circulated condition described for this video, the market figure you provided is $184,000. Yes, $184,000. That is an extraordinary figure for a single quarter, and it is exactly why old American coins deserve a second look before being dismissed as ordinary change. But one important point must be crystal clear. $184,000 should be treated as the stated market figure for the specific coin example described in this video, not as a guaranteed price for every 1,934 no mint mark Washington quarter. Actual selling prices can vary dramatically depending on authentication, grading, originality, eye appeal, provenance, and the specific buyer or auction. Still, imagine discovering a coin with this kind of potential hidden among an old collection. That is the excitement of the hunt. A tiny piece of American history can carry a story that reaches back more than 90 years, and the possibility of discovering something extraordinary is exactly what keeps collectors searching. So don't overlook those old quarters. Check the dates, check the surfaces, check the details, and never clean a potentially valuable coin just because it looks dark or dirty. This is only coin number 1, and we are just getting started. And remember, Hidden Coin Millions is freshly updated every day, bringing you more incredible American coin discoveries, more rare dates, more hidden details, and more stories about the pieces of money that collectors refuse to ignore. Keep your eyes open, keep your old coins safe, and stay with us. Coin number 2. Now we move to coin number 2, and this one takes us to a fascinating turning point in American coin history. Take a close look at this 1964 Washington quarter with no mint mark, showing black spots and an old, circulated appearance. At first glance, someone might see nothing more than an aged quarter, but collectors know that sometimes the story hidden behind an old coin is far more interesting than its appearance suggests. The year 1964 is especially important because it represents the final year of the regular Washington quarter's original silver era. Washington quarters, struck from 1932 through 1964, were made with a 90% silver and 10% copper composition, and the 1964 issue was part of that final silver chapter. The coin weighs about 6.25 grams and contains approximately 1,808 troy ounces of silver. And this is where the history becomes powerful. America was experiencing a major coin shortage during the early 1960s, while the rising price of silver was putting enormous pressure on the nation's coinage system. The United States continued striking 1,964 dated silver quarters, even as the country prepared for a major change in coin composition. In 1965, the mint moved to the copper-nickel-clad quarter, bringing the traditional circulating silver Washington quarter era to an end. So when you hold a genuine 1964 Washington quarter, you are holding one of the last regular circulating quarters produced under that classic 90% silver standard. That alone gives this date a special historical identity among American coin collectors. Now look at the design. On the obverse, George Washington faces left, surrounded by the inscriptions associated with the United States quarter. Flip the coin over and you find John Flanagan's famous eagle design, with the eagle positioned above arrows and an olive branch. The reeded edge completes the traditional appearance of this historic silver quarter. These design elements became one of the most recognizable combinations in American pocket change. But there is another detail that immediately catches our attention: the missing mint mark. A 1964 Washington quarter without a mint mark is associated with the Philadelphia Mint. The Philadelphia issue had a very large production, with reported mintage of 560 pounds, 390,585 pieces, while the Denver issue carried a D mint mark and had a substantially larger mintage. Now, I want you to understand something extremely important about the way collectors examine coins. A missing mint mark by itself does not automatically make a 1964 quarter extraordinarily rare. The date, mint, variety, strike quality, condition, surface preservation, and authentication all have to be considered together. And that brings us directly to the appearance of our featured coin. This particular example is described as having black spots and an old circulated condition. Those dark areas can make an aged silver coin look dramatic and immediately grab attention. But experienced collectors do not stop at appearance. They examine whether the coloration is natural toning, environmental discoloration, residue, corrosion, or another surface issue. They also inspect the lettering, date, portrait, eagle, rims, and overall remaining detail. That is why you should never aggressively clean an old silver quarter. A coin that looks dark or dirty may still have an original surface, and cleaning can permanently change that surface. If you discover an old silver quarter that appears unusual, the smartest move is to preserve it exactly as you found it, and have it professionally evaluated if its characteristics appear significant. Now let's talk about collector demand. The 1964 Washington quarter has a powerful combination that collectors immediately recognize: an established American design, the final year of the regular circulating silver quarter era, substantial silver content, and decades of American history. Modern collectors also pursue 1964 quarters for high-grade examples, varieties, errors, and other special characteristics. The ordinary examples are common, but exceptional specimens can enter an entirely different level of collecting interest. And that is exactly why you should never judge an old coin simply by looking at it for 2 seconds. If you find a 1964 quarter, first confirm the date. Then check the mint mark area carefully. Examine the surfaces under good lighting. Look at the rims and lettering. Compare both sides. And most importantly, do not clean it. If you believe the coin has unusual characteristics or potentially exceptional condition, professional authentication and grading can help establish what you actually have. Now comes the moment we've been building toward. For the 1964 Washington quarter, with no mint mark, black spots, and old circulated condition described for this video, The market figure you provided is $158,000. $158,000 for one coin. That is the kind of number that turns an ordinary-looking piece of American currency into a headline-worthy treasure story. But remember, this is the specific value figure supplied for the particular coin described in our video, not a guaranteed price for every 1,964 Philadelphia Washington quarter. Actual market prices can vary substantially depending on authentication, grade, surface quality, originality, varieties, errors, provenance, and the circumstances of an actual sale. For context, standard 1,964 quarters are widely available, so a six-figure valuation would require exceptional characteristics and verification rather than simply the date and lack of mint mark. And that is what makes the hunt so exciting. Imagine opening an old family collection and finding a quarter dated 1964. Imagine noticing the silver appearance, the aged surfaces, the missing mint mark, and realizing that this tiny piece of American history deserves a much closer examination. That moment is what keeps collectors searching. The greatest lesson here is simple. Don't dismiss old coins because they look worn, dark, or forgotten. Sometimes the most exciting discoveries begin with a coin that nobody bothered to examine carefully. This is coin number 2, and already we have traveled from the early years of the Washington quarter to the final chapter of its original circulating silver era. And remember, Hidden Coin Millions is freshly updated every day, bringing you new, rare coin discoveries, historic American treasures, incredible collector stories, and coins that can make you stop and look twice. So keep checking those old quarters, preserve what you find, and stay right here. Coin number 3. Now we arrive at coin number 3, and this one has a detail that every serious Washington quarter collector wants you to notice immediately: the D mint mark. We are looking at a 1957 Washington quarter struck at the Denver Mint, with a beautiful dark shade and the uncirculated, fine-condition appearance described for this video. At first glance, this coin can look like a beautifully aged piece of American silver. But once you understand where it came from, when it was produced, and what collectors look for in a high-quality example, the story becomes much more exciting. The year 1957 sits directly inside the classic silver Washington quarter era. Washington quarters of this period were struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, weighed approximately 6.25 grams, measured about 24.3 millimeters, and had a reeded edge. The 1957 with D issue was produced at the Denver Mint, with a reported mintage of 924,160 quarters. That silver composition is a major part of this coin's identity. Think about the era when this quarter entered American commerce. This was long before today's familiar copper-nickel-clad quarters. Americans were carrying genuine silver quarters in their pockets, using them in everyday transactions without necessarily realizing that these pieces of currency would eventually become collectible pieces of American history. And that's what makes an old silver Washington quarter so fascinating. It isn't simply a denomination. It represents a completely different chapter in the history of United States money. The design itself is equally important. On the front, you have the famous portrait of George Washington, created by sculptor John Flanagan. The reverse presents the powerful American eagle above the arrows and olive branch. These images became one of the most recognizable designs ever placed on American circulating coinage. But now, look closely at that tiny letter. That D tells you the coin was struck at Denver. And this is where the collector hunt becomes interesting. The 1957 with D Washington quarter had a substantial mintage, so the date and mint mark alone do not automatically make every example an ultra-rare treasure. In fact, modern grading references show that many surviving examples exist in various grades. But collector value can rise dramatically when an individual coin possesses exceptional preservation, strong strike quality, attractive surfaces, desirable toning, or other collectible characteristics. Specifically notes that 1957 with D quarters are available in gem grades, with some examples surviving in very high mint state condition. And that brings us to the condition of our featured coin. You described this example as having a black shade, beautiful look, and uncirculated fine condition. That appearance can be extremely dramatic on an old silver coin. But here's the collector's secret. Dark does not automatically mean damaged, and beautiful does not automatically mean valuable. The exact nature of the surface has to be examined. Collectors want to know whether the coloration is natural toning, environmental discoloration, residue, corrosion, or something else. They also inspect the coin for original surfaces, luster, contact marks, hairline scratches, strike quality, and remaining design detail. If the coin truly has an attractive original appearance and strong uncirculated preservation, that can completely change the conversation. In fact, condition is one of the biggest reasons Washington quarters from the same year can have dramatically different market values. A circulated example and a superb mint state example are not necessarily treated as the same collectible. Professional grading services separate these coins into precise grades, and the finest examples can attract intense competition from collectors building registry sets or searching for exceptional specimens. PCGS's current population data also shows that certified 1957 with D Washington quarters exist across numerous mint state grades, illustrating how important condition is when evaluating this issue. So if you ever find a 1957 with D Washington quarter, don't rush to clean it. Don't polish the surface. Don't rub away the dark shade. Don't try to make the silver look brighter. Instead, protect the coin and examine it carefully under good lighting. Check the date. Confirm that unmistakable D mint mark. Study Washington's portrait. Inspect the eagle on the reverse. Look closely around the rims and lettering. And if the coin genuinely appears uncirculated with exceptional preservation or unusual characteristics, professional authentication and grading can be an important step. Because in serious coin collecting, the difference between an ordinary survivor and an extraordinary survivor can be enormous. And now we have reached the moment where this coin's story takes a dramatic turn. For the specific 1957 with D Washington quarter, with black shade, beautiful appearance, and uncirculated fine condition described for this video, the market figure you provided is $170,400. Yes, $170,400. That is a massive figure attached to the particular coin description supplied for this video, turning this little silver quarter into the kind of hidden treasure story that makes collectors stop, look again, and investigate every old coin they encounter. However, let's make one crucial distinction clear for your audience. $170,400 is the value figure you provided for this specific example. It is not a verified current market price for every 1957 with D Washington quarter. Current professional price guides show ordinary 1957 with D examples at much lower levels, while exceptional high-grade pieces can command substantially higher prices. July 2026 guide, for example, lists the issue from about $12.25 in circulated grades and shows substantially higher figures for top mint state examples. Likewise, lists significantly higher values for exceptional grades. So if you want to describe $170,400 in a video, present it as the stated value for the specific exceptional coin being discussed, rather than claiming that every 1,957 with D quarter is worth that amount. And that makes the hunt even more exciting, because somewhere out there, an old collection could contain a coin that deserves far more attention than its face value suggests. The coin might have been stored away for decades. It might have passed through several hands. It might have been forgotten in a family collection. And the only way to discover what you truly have is to look closely. That's the real power of coin collecting. A tiny silver quarter can carry an enormous story. A tiny letter can reveal where it was made. A single date can connect you to a completely different America. An exceptional preservation can make collectors compete fiercely for the best surviving examples. So remember this collector tip. Whenever you encounter a 1957 with D Washington quarter, never judge it in a hurry. Check the surfaces, preserve the original appearance, examine the mint mark, and if the coin looks unusually sharp and untouched, consider professional authentication and grading. And if you are building a serious collection, keep records of where your coins came from and preserve them properly. The better you protect an original coin today, the easier it becomes for future collectors to understand exactly what they are looking at. This is coin number 3, and the treasure hunt is getting more intense with every coin. And don't forget, Hidden Coin Millions is freshly updated every day, bringing you more rare American coins, more hidden discoveries, more incredible dates, and more stories designed to help you look at everyday money with completely different eyes. We've already uncovered historic silver quarters from multiple decades, but we are nowhere near finished. Coin number 4. Now we have reached coin number 4, and this time we are leaving the world of Washington quarters and moving into one of America's most recognizable 10-cent pieces, the Roosevelt dime. Take a close look at the coin we're discussing. A 1994 Roosevelt dime with a P mint mark showing brown dots, a beautiful appearance, and the fine condition described for this video. At first, this may look like a tiny modern-era coin that could easily be ignored. But that is exactly why you should never rush past an old or unusual coin. The smallest pieces can sometimes carry fascinating stories, and the details surrounding their production are what collectors examine extremely carefully. The Roosevelt dime was introduced in 1946, honoring President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The obverse features Roosevelt's portrait, while the reverse carries a torch surrounded by olive and oak branches, symbols associated with liberty, peace, and strength. The design was created by John R. Sinnock, and the Roosevelt dime has remained one of the most familiar denominations in American coinage for generations. But our 1994 example belongs to a very different chapter of the series. By 1994, Roosevelt dimes were no longer made from the 90% silver composition used for the earliest Roosevelt dimes. The regular 1994 Philadelphia issue was struck in a copper-nickel-clad composition with a copper core and an outer layer containing nickel and copper. Lists the coin at approximately 2.27 grams with a diameter of 17.90 millimeters and a reeded edge. And now comes one of the most important clues on this coin, the tiny P. That P identifies the Philadelphia Mint. According to available mintage records, Philadelphia struck approximately 1,189 Roosevelt dimes dated 1994. That is an enormous production number, which means the ordinary 1994 P dime is not automatically rare simply because it carries the P mint mark. So why are collectors still interested in examples like this? Because serious coin collecting is not simply about finding an old date. It is about examining the complete coin. Condition matters. Surface quality matters. Strike quality matters. Full details matter. Unusual varieties matter. And the way a coin has been preserved over the decades can completely change how collectors view it. Our featured coin is described as having brown dots and a beautiful look in fine condition. Those brown areas immediately create visual character. On a clad coin, however, collectors will want to determine exactly what produced those spots. They could represent toning, environmental discoloration, surface contamination, or another form of alteration. A professional examination is the only reliable way to determine what is actually happening on the coin. And this is where I want every collector watching to pay attention. Never clean an unusual Roosevelt dime. Do not scrub it. Do not polish it. Do not use chemicals to make the surface brighter. Do not try to remove the brown dots yourself. Preserving the coin exactly as you discovered it is usually far safer than attempting a home restoration. Once the original surface has been altered, that change can be permanent. Now look closely at the design. On the obverse, Franklin D. Roosevelt's portrait dominates the coin. Around him are the inscriptions identifying the United States and denomination. On the reverse, the torch stands at the center, surrounded by the olive and oak branches. The tiny details in these areas can be especially useful when examining the strike and preservation of an individual coin. For collectors, another feature can be particularly interesting: the full bands designation. The bands across the torch on Roosevelt dimes can be examined for completeness and sharpness. High-grade Roosevelt dime collectors often pay close attention to these details because exceptional strike and preservation can separate an ordinary mint-state coin from a much more desirable specimen. And that is why the condition of any 1994 with P. Roosevelt dime should be examined carefully rather than judged simply by its age. In fact, professional references show just how dramatic the difference can be between an ordinary example and an exceptional certified specimen. Lists the regular 1994 P issue with a huge mintage of 1,189,000, while its recorded auction information shows that exceptional graded examples can attract much more attention than ordinary circulated coins. So here's your collector strategy for this coin. If you find a 1994 Roosevelt dime, first confirm the date. Then look for the P mint mark. Examine both sides under strong lighting. Study the torch and its bands. Look at Roosevelt's portrait and the lettering. Inspect the rims and edge. Pay special attention to unusual spots, colors, surfaces, or apparent minting characteristics. And if the coin looks significantly different from normal examples, don't immediately assume you've found something ordinary or something extraordinarily rare. Preserve it first, investigate it second, and authenticate it before making a major valuation claim. Because the real treasure hunt begins when you stop looking at coins as simple pieces of money and start looking at them as individual objects with their own production history. Now we reach the dramatic moment. For the specific 1994 with P. Roosevelt dime with brown dots, beautiful appearance, and fine condition described for this video, the market figure you provided is $65,000. $65,000. That is an enormous figure for a 10-cent coin, and it creates exactly the kind of hidden treasure mystery that makes collectors want to examine every unusual dime they encounter. But I want to make this absolutely clear for your audience. $65,000 is the specific value figure you supplied for the particular coin described in this video. It is not a verified current market price for every 1,994 with P. Roosevelt dime. Current reference data shows that ordinary 1,994 with P examples are extremely common, while exceptional specimens and recognized varieties can command higher premiums. For example, records a 1,994 WTE regular strike auction result of $129 for an MS67 example, while other specialized characteristics can change the value substantially. So if your specific coin is being presented at the $65,000 figure, its exact condition, originality, variety, error status, certification, provenance, and other characteristics would need to be verified before calling that amount a confirmed sale price. And that makes the discovery even more exciting. Because imagine finding this tiny Roosevelt dime inside an old collection. You notice the 1994 date. You spot the P mint mark. You see the unusual brown dots and beautiful appearance. Instead of tossing it back into a jar, you stop. You look closer. You preserve it. You investigate it. And suddenly, that little dime becomes the center of the entire collection. That is the excitement of American coin hunting. A coin does not have to be large to have a fascinating story. It does not have to look perfect at first glance. And it certainly should never be dismissed without examination. Remember, Hidden Coin Millions is freshly updated every day, bringing you more incredible American coin stories, rare date discoveries, unusual varieties, and hidden treasures that deserve a second look. We have now reached coin number 4, and the treasure hunt has moved from historic silver Washington quarters into the world of Roosevelt dimes. But there is still one final coin waiting. And after everything we've seen so far, you definitely do not want to miss what comes next. Stay with me. Coin number 5. Now we have reached coin number 5, the final coin in today's treasure hunt. And this one takes us into one of the most interesting transition periods in Roosevelt dime history. Take a close look at the coin we are discussing, a 1968 Roosevelt dime with no mint mark, showing a brown layer and circulated condition. At first glance, it may look like a heavily aged little dime that has simply spent years moving through American commerce. But this date carries a fascinating story, and the missing mint mark makes this coin especially important to examine carefully. The Roosevelt dime had already been part of American life for more than 2 decades by 1968. The series began in 1946, honoring President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the familiar design continued to appear in American commerce as the country entered a completely different era of coin production. But 1968 is particularly interesting because it sits within the period when the United States had already moved away from the original 90% silver composition used for earlier Roosevelt dimes. By this point, regular Roosevelt dimes were being produced in a copper-nickel-clad composition, consisting of outer layers of copper-nickel bonded to a copper core. And then we come to the detail that makes collectors stop. There is no mint mark. For a 1968 Roosevelt dime, that detail deserves extremely careful attention because the mint mark story of this era is not as simple as merely saying, "No mint mark means Philadelphia." In fact, 1968 is a fascinating transition year for U.S. coinage. The San Francisco Mint produced proof Roosevelt dimes dated 1968, and the Denver Mint produced regular 1968 with D. Roosevelt dimes. The Philadelphia Mint did not produce regular Roosevelt dimes that year. This makes authentication and identification especially important when someone encounters a 1968 dime without the expected mint mark. That means you should never look at the date alone. You need to examine the entire coin. Look at Roosevelt's portrait. Study the lettering. Examine the reverse torch and surrounding branches. Inspect the area where the mint mark should appear. Check the rims and surfaces. Then compare the coin against authenticated examples. That is where the real collector's eye comes into play. Now let's talk about the appearance of our featured example. You describe this coin as having a brown layer and circulated condition. That aged brown appearance can immediately give the coin a dramatic vintage look. But collectors understand that color alone does not establish rarity or value. Brown coloration can come from natural toning, environmental exposure, surface contamination, or other forms of discoloration. The exact cause has to be examined before anyone can make a serious judgment about the coin. And this is one of the most important collector tips of the entire video. Never clean a potentially valuable old Roosevelt dime. Don't polish it. Don't scrub the brown layer away. Don't use chemicals. Don't try to restore the surface at home. That old-looking surface is part of the coin's current condition, and altering it can permanently change the coin. Preserve the piece exactly as you discovered it, and let a qualified professional determine what you actually have. Now let's talk about why Roosevelt dimes from this era continue to attract collectors. The Roosevelt dime is one of the longest-running designs in United States coinage. Collectors build complete date and mint collections, search for errors and varieties, pursue high-grade examples, and examine unusual surfaces and strikes. Even when a particular date had substantial production, individual coins can become much more interesting when they possess exceptional characteristics. And 1968 gives collectors another reason to pay attention. The mint mark situation is important. According to reference material, mint mark placement and production changed across the Roosevelt dime series, and the late 1960s were part of an important transition in U.S. coin production. For anyone examining a 1968 example, verifying the mint and exact issue is essential before making a rarity claim. This is why experienced collectors don't simply say, "It's old, therefore it's valuable." They investigate. They compare. They authenticate. They preserve. And only then do they determine what level of collector interest the coin deserves. Now imagine finding this coin inside an old collection. You pull out a small dime. You see 1968. You notice the aged brown layer. You see the circulated surfaces. Then you begin checking the details. Suddenly, what looked like an ordinary 10-cent piece becomes a mystery. Where was it struck? Why does it look this way? Is the surface original? Is there an unusual variety? Is there an error? Is the coin genuine? Could its condition or characteristics make it significantly more desirable than an ordinary example? Those are the questions that turn coin collecting into a treasure hunt. And if you believe you have a genuinely unusual 1968 Roosevelt dime, the smartest move is to protect it and have it evaluated by a reputable professional grading or authentication service. A certified grade can provide an independent assessment of authenticity and condition, which is especially important when a very large valuation is being considered. Now we have finally reached the moment you've been waiting for. For the specific 1968 Roosevelt dime, with no mint mark, brown layer, and circulated condition described for this video, the market figure you provided is $140,000. $140,000. That is an extraordinary figure for a 10-cent coin, and it is exactly the kind of number that makes the hidden coin hunt so exciting. But remember, this is the specific value figure supplied for the particular coin described in this video, not a verified price for every 1968 Roosevelt dime. A six-figure valuation would require the exact coin's authenticity, variety, or error status, grade, surface condition, provenance, and market evidence to be independently verified. The existence of ordinary 1968 Roosevelt dimes and the complicated mint mark history of this year means the specific characteristics of an individual coin are absolutely critical. So if someone tells you that every 1,968 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark is automatically worth $140,000, do not believe that claim without authentication and supporting market evidence. But if you genuinely discover a 1,968 Roosevelt dime with unusual characteristics, don't dismiss it either. Stop, look, preserve, investigate, because that tiny dime could deserve much more attention than you first imagined. And this is the lesson I want you to remember after watching this entire video. Never judge a coin only by its face value. A quarter can carry decades of American history. A dime can hide an unusual production story. A tiny mint mark, or the absence of one, can change the entire investigation. And a coin that has been sitting quietly in an old collection for decades may be waiting for the right person to finally notice it. That is why you should check your old coins carefully. Check the dates. Check the mint marks. Study both sides. Look for unusual surfaces and genuine minting characteristics. And if something looks different, don't clean it and don't spend it until you know exactly what you have. This brings us to the end of today's Top 5 Ultra-Rare and Most Valuable Washington Quarter and Roosevelt Dime Treasure Hunt. We started with an early 1934 Washington Quarter, traveled through the classic silver quarter era, examined a 1957 with D Washington Quarter, and then moved into the Roosevelt Dime series with two fascinating dates. And remember, Hidden Coin Millions is freshly updated every day. We are constantly bringing you new American coin discoveries, historic dates, unusual varieties, collector secrets, and hidden treasures that deserve a second look. So before you close that old coin jar, before you empty that forgotten collection, and before you send an unusual old coin back into circulation, look at it one more time. Because sometimes the most exciting treasure isn't buried underground. Sometimes it's already sitting in your collection.